They sent the police to shut down my guest's birthday brunch in a house that isn't even under their control. I stood in my driveway watching two officers question a confused couple with a cake box in hand, while my lights and water had mysteriously gone out that same morning. That's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was war. You know the part that really kills me? I'm not some rebel out here trying to burn down the neighborhood. I'm one of the good ones. Ask anybody. I live in Clearwater Hills, one of those planned communities with the fancy stone sign out front and the newsletter full of tips about which flowers are seasonally appropriate. I bought in 12 years ago, knew exactly what I was getting into, and I play by the rules. Always have. My lawn? Impeccable. HOA approved native plants, trimmed hedges. My garage? Painted the correct shade of taupe. Trash cans? In by 9 a.m. the next morning. Without fail. Hell, I even chaired the landscaping committee 2 years ago. Spent 4 months helping neighbors choose perennials. We voted on bench designs for God's sake. And that's where this whole thing becomes so stupid. Because here's what Pamela Stratton, our beloved HOA president, refuses to understand. There are things I care about more than ornamental grasses and mailbox paint. I used to be a corporate attorney. Did that for 15 years. But after enough late nights arguing about patent law and staring at spreadsheets at 3 a.m., I bailed. Cashed out, downsized my practice, started investing in real estate. Now, I run a small but very successful vacation rental business. 12 homes, high-end, short-term rentals in the best parts of the county, no party houses, no junk. I target business travelers, tech workers, families on getaway weekends. I vet guests carefully. I keep properties spotless. It's a good living. I like the work. I'm proud of the reputation I've built. 6 months ago, an opportunity came up, a little craftsman house on Westvale Drive, just outside Clearwater Hills, literally 1 block down the street from my own home. The lot line is a matter of public record. My HOA ends at the corner. This house sits in the unincorporated part of the county. No HOA, no covenants, standard zoning. It had been sitting vacant for nearly a year. Foreclosure, poor condition, outdated wiring. I picked it up for a good price, brought in a crew, cleaned it up. Restored the hardwoods, redid the kitchen, put in smart locks, a solid security system. When I listed it on Airbnb, I made sure everything was compliant. County permit, business license, tourist tax registration. The house went live and boom, instant success. Turns out a lot of people want a beautiful craftsman with a yard in a quiet neighborhood 5 minutes from downtown. I was thrilled, the guests loved it, reviews came in glowing. Perfect weekend getaway. Immaculate house, great neighborhood. Host was professional and responsive. And that was fine for about 3 weeks. Then I got the first email. It was from Pamela, of course, so full of sugary language and thinly veiled menace. Dear Mr. Royce, we've received concerns from several neighbors regarding increased traffic on Westvale Drive. As you know, Clearwater Hills maintains high community standards, and short-term rentals can negatively impact our property values and quality of life. She closed with this little gem. We trust you will voluntarily cease this activity in the interest of neighborhood harmony. I actually laughed out loud. Because again, this house is not in Clearwater Hills. She has no authority there. None, zero. So I replied, politely of course, thank you for your concern. The property in question is outside HOA jurisdiction. All rental activity is fully licensed and legal. I remain committed to being a good neighbor. That should have been the end of it, right? But no, Pamela does not like being told no, especially by someone she sees as part of her community. I'd been a model citizen until now. A club member. One of hers. And now I was running an unsanctioned hotel at the gates of her little kingdom, an affront she could not tolerate. The next week, anonymous complaints to the county. Noise complaints from a house that had no guests that weekend. Trash complaints when the bins were empty. Then a formal letter from the HOA, complete with their logo and legal-sounding language, demanding that I cease all rental activity or face further action. Again, they had no authority, none. But it was clear now, Pamela wasn't going to let this go. And what I didn't know yet? That this was only the beginning. She was about to take it much, much further than I ever thought possible. The first real shot across the bow came a few days later. It was a Tuesday, I remember because I was sitting on my back deck, laptop open, finalizing next month's booking calendar for my properties. The Craftsman house, the one causing all this fuss, was booked solid for the next 6 weeks. Families coming in for graduations, couples for wine weekends, business travelers on short trips. The calendar was a thing of beauty. I just clicked save when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, local area code. I answered. "Is this Mr. Royce?" "Yes." "This is Officer Reynolds with the County Sheriff's Department. I'm responding to a report of illegal commercial activity at 82 Westvale Drive." I blinked. "Illegal what?" "We received a complaint that the property is being operated as an unlicensed hotel, possibly in violation of zoning ordinances. I'm on site now. Are you the owner?" I stood up fast. "Yes, the property is a fully permitted short-term rental, all licenses current. What's going on?" He sighed. "Guests are here. They're confused. I'd appreciate it if you could come down." I was there in 7 minutes flat. There were 2 sheriff's cruisers parked across from the house. One officer was talking to a young couple, mid-20s, clearly rattled, standing on the front steps with a bakery box and a wrapped gift. The woman was near tears. The guy kept glancing at the patrol car. I pulled up, got out, and introduced myself to Officer Reynolds. "Mr. Royce," he said, shaking my hand. "Look, I think this is a misunderstanding. We had an anonymous complaint about an unlicensed hotel here. We have to check these things out." I handed him printed copies of my county permit, business license, and the latest tax receipt. He reviewed them carefully. "Looks legit to me." He lowered his voice. "Off the record, we get these calls sometimes. Certain neighbors think short-term rentals ruin neighborhoods." I glanced across the street, and sure enough, there she was. Pamela Stratton, HOA president, standing on her porch with binoculars, I kid you not, aimed right at us. Our eyes met. She didn't blink. That's when I knew this was deliberate. I turned back to the officer. "Guests are here for a birthday brunch. No parties, no noise, just a rental." He nodded. "You're fine. I'll log it as cleared." I apologized profusely to the guests, lovely couple from Portland who just wanted to surprise a friend. They were shaken but understanding. But the damage was done. By the time they left that afternoon, they'd messaged me. "Loved the house, but really stressful experience. Not sure we'd rebook." I couldn't blame them. When I checked Airbnb that night, their review was polite, but mentioned the police visit. My listing dropped from Superhost to under review in 2 days. One bogus call, one ruined weekend, and Pamela had struck her first blow. But I wasn't stupid. I knew this was just her opening move, so I started documenting everything, printed every email, saved every text, installed 2 more cameras at the Craftsman, driveway, and front door, set up alerts on my utility accounts, and I started digging into HOA bylaws just to be sure. No surprises. Clearwater Hills ends 1 street up. My house is outside it, 0 jurisdiction. The county confirmed it in writing, twice. I even met with my attorney, just in case. He chuckled when I told him, "Pamela's playing with fire, stay patient." I intended to, but Pamela? She was just getting warmed up. You'd think after the police visit, Pamela would have felt like she'd made her point. She hadn't even started. The following week was the first hit to my wallet. It was Friday, changeover day. 1 guest out, new ones in that evening. I always do a personal final check. Beds made, towels stacked, Wi-Fi tested, HVAC running. Except when I walked into the Craftsman that afternoon, it was 85 degrees inside, and silent. The thermostat was dark. I checked the breaker panel. Everything looked fine. Then I checked the smart meter online. No service. I called the utility company, got bounced between 3 departments before a guy named Mark finally looked it up. "Yeah, looks like service was discontinued this morning." "Why?" Says here, customer request. Account holder requested service cancellation. I almost laughed. "I am the account holder. I didn't request anything." He went quiet. "Huh. Well, the request came through our online portal, verified by looks like an HOA authorization code." I sat down. "There is no HOA authorization for this property. It's not in Clearwater Hills. They have no authority here." Mark apologized, said they'd launch an internal review, but getting the power turned back on would take at least 48 hours, which meant my guests that night were walking into a dark house. I called them immediately, explained the situation. They were understanding, switched to a hotel, but of course they canceled the booking. That hit my Airbnb rating again, hard. Second blow landed. 2 days later, I woke up to a text from one of my cleaning crew. "No water at Westvale, main shutoff looks locked." I drove over. Sure enough, the main shutoff in the yard had a utility lock on it. Another round of calls. Water company claimed there'd been a non-compliance report filed, triggering a temporary shutdown pending inspection. Filed by who? Clearwater Hills HOA, the rep admitted, sounding embarrassed. I gave her the same speech I'd given the power company, property not an HOA, no jurisdiction, no right to request anything. She promised to escalate it. But again, getting the lock removed would take 72 hours. Another booking lost, another bad review, another refund. At this point, I knew exactly what was happening. Pamela wasn't going through official HOA channels anymore. She was calling in favors. Her husband sits on the county zoning board. Her brother-in-law is an executive at the power company. She's been president of Clearwater Hills for 9 years, plenty of time to make friends in useful places. And clearly, she'd decided this was personal. The next week brought more nonsense. One morning, I pulled up to the Craftsman to check the mail and found half the front sidewalk taped off with orange cones and caution tape. Utility work, a little sign read. Except no work was being done, no crew in sight, no permits filed, as I confirmed later that day with the county. A fake obstruction, just enough to spook guests. That afternoon, my next guest canceled, said her elderly mother couldn't navigate the blocked walkway. Another hit. I was now down almost $4,500 in canceled bookings in under 3 weeks. My superhost status was gone. My listing was starting to slip in search rankings. Every cancellation was a scar on my profile, and through it all, Pamela kept her poker face. At the HOA's monthly garden party, she greeted me with a smile as fake as the azaleas on her porch. "I do hope everything's going well with your little rental venture," she purred, eyes glittering. She knew, of course she knew, but the best part? She thought she was winning. What she didn't know was that I was documenting everything. Every call, every email, every anonymous complaint. I'd started working with a former colleague, an investigator who used to handle corporate compliance audits. He helped me track down the source of the fake utility requests. Guess whose IP address came up on the bogus water shutoff form? Yep, Pamela's home network. We weren't ready to strike yet, but the case was building. And then she pushed one step too far. It was a Saturday night. Guests were in, young couple from Seattle, in town for a wedding. Around 9 p.m., I got a call from them, panicked. "There's a cop at the door," the woman said. "He says they got a report about a loud party and possible drug use. We're not doing anything, it's just us." I jumped in my car and raced over. Sure enough, cruiser in front, officer on the porch. Same story, anonymous complaint. Loud music, suspected drug activity. The couple was nearly in tears. The officer, thankfully, was professional. Took one look inside, saw the empty living room, 2 people watching Netflix with wine glasses, and shook his head. "No issue here," he said to me quietly, "but you might want to talk to whoever keeps making these calls." That was it. 3 weeks of targeted harassment, 4 ruined bookings, thousands in losses, and now my guests were being directly harassed, in person. Pamela had crossed the line. It wasn't about community standards anymore. It wasn't about property values. It was about power. She was trying to crush me, to force me to stop renting a house that legally she had zero control over. And that night, sitting in my home office at midnight, I finally said, enough. It was time to fight back. I didn't go nuclear right away. That's not how I'm wired. Years in corporate law teach you one thing above all. Build your case first. Exhaust your reasonable options. Make sure when the hammer drops, it's justified. So Monday morning, after that humiliating Saturday night police call, I sat down and started drafting emails. First, to the county utilities office. I'd already spoken to Mark and the rep from the water department who were helpful but nervous. They knew this smelled bad. Now I wanted it in writing. I wrote, "To whom it may concern, I am the sole owner of 82 Westvale Drive. The property is not under the jurisdiction of Clearwater Hills HOA. I hereby formally request an investigation into any recent utility service requests affecting this property, including the source of those requests." I attached copies of the fake shutoff notices, screenshots of my own service portal showing unexplained cancellations, and highlighted the IP trace my investigator had pulled from the water department's online logs. Second, I emailed Pamela directly, kept it calm, professional, no threats, no name-calling. "Pamela, I've documented a series of incidents affecting my property at 82 Westvale, which is not under Clearwater Hills HOA jurisdiction. This includes unauthorized utility shutoffs, false police reports, obstruction of access, guest harassment. I am formally requesting that you and any members of the HOA or affiliated individuals cease all actions targeting this property. Further interference may result in legal action." Short, cold, to the point. I CC'd the HOA board, partly so they'd know what was happening, partly so there'd be a paper trail. Then I waited. The first response came from the county utility office. A supervisor named Ellen called me 2 days later, clearly rattled. "Mr. Royce, we've reviewed the water shutoff request. It was filed online from an account associated with, well, not your property." "Was it the HOA?" I asked. A long pause. "We can't officially comment yet, but I'll tell you this, we're escalating it to legal." I thanked her, another brick in the wall. The second response came from Pamela herself, 4 days later. Not an apology, not an admission, a threat. "Mr. Royce, Clearwater Hills, HOA has a vested interest in preserving the quality of life in this neighborhood. While your property may technically fall outside our boundary, the impact of your short-term rental activity is felt within our community. We are prepared to take all appropriate steps, legal and otherwise, to ensure our neighborhood standards are maintained." Legal and otherwise. I read that line 3 times, saved it, printed it. She had just handed me a loaded gun, in writing, but I still wasn't done trying to de-escalate. Next step, City Planning Department. I booked an appointment, walked in with a folder an inch thick, permits, licenses, emails, and the HOA's latest threat. The city planner I met with, younger guy, sharp, flipped through everything. Shook his head. "You're in the clear," he said. "Zoning allows short-term rentals at that address. You have all the required permits. The HOA has no authority here." I asked him to issue an official letter stating as much. He did, stamped, signed with city letterhead, another brick. I sent that letter again to Pamela and the HOA board, attached the city planner's note, reiterated my request that they cease interfering. No response, but things got quieter for about a week. Then came the anonymous flyers. Someone papered Westvale Drive with cheap printouts. "Did you know short-term rentals attract crime, lower your property value, endanger your children? Say no to illegal hotels in our neighborhood." No name, no signature. But the font and phrasing? Straight out of Pamela's style book. Neighbors told me they'd seen a woman matching Pamela's description posting them late at night. And that week, another booking canceled, guests citing concerns about neighborhood hostility. I was burning cash now, thousands a month. So I made one last attempt. I called Pamela, director. "Pamela, it's Ethan. I think we need to talk." A pause, then her practiced smile over the phone. "Of course, Mr. Royce, I'm always open to dialogue." We met at the HOA clubhouse, neutral ground. She showed up in full regalia, tailored navy suit, HOA lapel pin, leather portfolio. I came with one thing, a folder. Inside, a city letter affirming my legal rental rights, utility correspondence, screenshots of her email threats, IP trace report from my investigator. I laid them out on the table. "Pamela, this ends now," I said. Calm, not angry, just done. "You've crossed the line from community standards to targeted harassment. The next step is a lawsuit." She barely glanced at the papers, smiled, cold and brittle. "Mr. Royce, sometimes it's not about legality, it's about community values. You should consider whether it's worth it, keeping this little business going when no one here wants it." There it was, the naked threat. No more masks. I stood. "Pamela, this is no longer about a business. It's about whether you're above the law. I'll give you one more chance to back down. Publicly, otherwise, we go to court." She didn't answer, just gathered her papers. As I walked out, she called after me. "You'll regret this, Ethan." And in that moment, I knew. The peaceful phase was over. It was time to end this, permanently. The thing about fighting people like Pamela? You have to assume the surface story isn't the real story. On paper, she was fighting to protect the neighborhood. In practice, she was sinking hours, favors, and serious risk into shutting me down. It didn't add up. Why not just let it go? Why risk a lawsuit? I smelled something bigger, so while I was sending my polite cease and desist letters and taking meetings at City Hall, my investigator, Nate, kept digging. Nate used to do corporate compliance work for a Fortune 500 I won't name. Guy knows how to pull threads. I called him one night after that last meeting with Pamela. "Look deeper," I said. "She's going all in on this. There's a reason." 3 days later, he called me back, voice tight with excitement. "You were right. It's not about you." "Oh? It's about who owns the empty lots." Now, quick side note here. Clearwater Hills looks like a finished neighborhood, but it's not. The original developer still owns about a dozen lots along the eastern boundary, the side that faces Westvale Drive. Those lots were supposed to be Phase 3. They've been sitting vacant for years, overgrown for sale but overpriced. Nobody cared, until now. Nate had pulled recent zoning filings. Turns out, 2 months after I bought my Craftsman, Pamela's brother-in-law, the one on the zoning board, quietly filed an application to rezone those lots for high-density boutique community living. Translation: high-end townhomes, small lots, big price tags, HOA controlled. The application hinged on one key point: that Clearwater Hills was a stable, exclusively residential community with no transient occupancy influence. And guess what the biggest risk to that claim was? My house. An active, legal short-term rental on Westvale Drive, staring directly across at those empty lots. A public record of complaints, police calls, utility issues, all the garbage Pamela had been engineering, would create a paper trail to argue that transient rentals were destabilizing the area. Why? Because if that zoning change got denied, the developer, Pamela's financial backer, would take a hit. And so would she. Nate sent me the filings. I read them 3 times. There it was, in black and white. Neighborhood standards compromised by recent uptick in transient rentals, evidenced by community incident reports and enforcement actions. Incident reports. Enforcement actions. All manufactured. Pamela wasn't protecting Clearwater Hills. She was protecting a land deal she was already financially tied to, through a side agreement with the developer's LLC. Nate even dug up the LLC's registry. Guess whose name was listed as community liaison with a pending revenue share? Pamela Stratton. It was brilliant in a way. Her campaign against my rental wasn't just about pride, it was about money. And the kicker? If she could show a sustained pattern of transient-related incidents, enough to sway the zoning board, she stood to personally pocket a 6-figure bonus when those townhomes sold. I sat there in my office, staring at the screen, heart pounding. She wasn't just harassing me out of some petty vendetta, she was committing fraud. Using her HOA presidency, her supposed duty to the community, as a blunt instrument for personal financial gain. And the entire smear campaign against my property? The anonymous flyers, the police calls, the utility shutdowns, all part of a paper trail she was building to poison the zoning record. That was the twist I didn't see coming. Suddenly, this wasn't a simple HOA dispute anymore. It was a full-blown corruption case, and that meant I had leverage, serious leverage. I called Nate. Document everything. I want a timeline, emails, filings, anything that connects her campaign against my house to that rezoning application. He laughed. Already on it. Within a week, we had a binder 3 inches thick. Timeline of harassment. Utility tampering requests. Police reports filed by anonymous HOA members. Pamela's zoning comments. Her LLC compensation agreement. And one more thing. We found an internal email from Pamela to the developer's lawyer, obtained legally via a records request on another zoning case. One line stood out. We are actively documenting problem incidents on Westvale to strengthen our application narrative. Boom, written admission. I leaned back in my chair, adrenaline buzzing. Pamela had overplayed her hand. She wasn't just vulnerable, she was wide open. And now? Now I had everything I needed to take her down. For good. I sat on my porch that night with a bourbon and a stack of printed emails. It was all right there. Pamela's campaign, the fake complaints, the utility shutdowns, the harassment, wasn't about me. It was about that zoning change, about money, about power. And suddenly, I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm, very calm. Because now I wasn't just defending my rental, I had an opportunity, a rare one, to burn her entire little empire to the ground. But I had to be smart about it. Pamela was connected. Her brother-in-law on the zoning board, her husband on the county planning commission, friends in utility companies, police contacts, and if I went charging in, she'd spin it. Disgruntled homeowner, angry Airbnb profiteer, whatever narrative served her. I needed to make this bigger than me. I needed the community to see the truth. And I needed to expose her on the record in a way that couldn't be buried. So here's what I planned, a 3-pronged attack. First prong, legal. I had enough evidence now to file a harassment lawsuit against both Pamela personally and the HOA as an entity. Utility tampering alone was actionable. Add in guest harassment, fraudulent police reports, and the rezoning conflict of interest. Slam dunk. But I didn't want to just sue. Not yet. I wanted to signal that I could sue, loudly, publicly. Which brings us to prong 2, media. I reached out to a reporter I knew, Sarah Kim, who specialized in local government corruption stories. I didn't dump everything at once, just enough to hook her. Sarah, you might want to look into the Clearwater Hills HOA president and her side deal with a developer. There's a short-term rental owner being targeted to fabricate a zoning case. Happy to provide documents. Her reply came in less than an hour. Holy hell, yes, when can we talk? I set up a meeting, gave her a carefully organized binder, timeline of harassment, zoning application docs, the damning email. Sarah's eyes practically lit up. This is gold, she said. They won't be able to spin this once it's out. Exactly the point. Third prong, community. Clearwater Hills looked buttoned up, but beneath the surface, people were sick of Pamela, her high-handed rules, her personal fiefdom, the way board meetings had become a rubber stamp for whatever she wanted. I started talking, quietly, to other homeowners. Shared a few interesting facts about the vacant lots, the zoning change, the HOA president's financial stake, and most importantly, the fact that our HOA dues were funding her legal fights. That part enraged people. She's using our money to sue a neighbor, one woman gasped. She told us that rental was illegal, another said. Now it turns out she's just trying to cash in? I let the conversation spread naturally. Gave people enough to start asking questions at the next board meeting, which conveniently was scheduled for the following week. Now I needed one more thing, timing. Sarah told me her story would publish online and in the Sunday paper, 2 days before the board meeting. Perfect. I gave her the green light. Meanwhile, I had my attorney draft a formal notice of intent to sue, complete with exhibits. I didn't file it. Not yet. I sent it certified mail to Pamela, the HOA board, and the developer's attorney. I wanted them to feel the noose tightening, and just to make sure they couldn't pull any last-minute stunts, I prepped my Airbnb listing with a full host transparency update, explaining the harassment and legal situation, complete with links to the city letter affirming my rental rights. I offered free reschedules to any concerned guests, which earned me glowing support from the Airbnb community. Now the pieces were in place. The press had the story. The HOA members were buzzing. Pamela had a legal warning on her desk, and my Airbnb listing was bulletproof against further smear attempts. I just had to wait, and man, watching that clock tick down was the sweetest kind of anticipation. Pamela thought she was about to steamroll me with zoning politics. She had no idea the flood was coming for her instead. I didn't have to wait long for the fireworks. Sarah's article dropped on Sunday morning, front page of the local section. HOA president's financial conflict and zoning fight, harassment alleged by local business owner. It was beautiful, clean, well-sourced, no editorializing, just facts, a timeline of events, quotes from the zoning application, a screenshot of the email Pamela had sent to the developer's lawyer, and best of all, several quotes from other Clearwater Hills residents, anonymously confirming Pamela's long pattern of bullying and self-dealing. By noon, my phone was lighting up with texts, neighbors, business contacts, even a city council member I barely knew. Holy hell, saw the paper, go get her. We always knew something was off, glad you're standing up. Pamela is done. I wasn't counting her out yet. People like her don't go down without a fight. But momentum had shifted. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, I got the call I'd been waiting for. Sarah again. Just heard from a source on the zoning board, she said. Pamela's brother-in-law is furious. They're postponing the rezoning vote indefinitely. One domino down, but I wasn't finished. Monday morning, I made a point of being highly visible, walking the dog around Clearwater Hills, waving cheerfully to neighbors. Pamela? Nowhere to be seen. That evening was the HOA board meeting. I got there early, folder in hand, and I wasn't alone. Word had spread fast. Usually these meetings drew maybe a dozen residents. That night, the clubhouse was packed, standing room only. People who hadn't shown up in years were there, folding chairs crammed into corners, folks leaning against the back wall. Pamela walked in 10 minutes late, looking like she'd aged 5 years overnight. Tight smile, stiff posture, no pearls this time. She opened with the usual boilerplate, treasurer's report, landscaping updates, voice clipped, eyes darting. Then she got to new business, tried to move quickly past the zoning topic. We've decided to pause our community support for the rezoning application in light of certain misunderstandings reported in the press. That was it. She was trying to bury it, but the room wasn't having it. Hands shot up. People started shouting questions. What about the flyers, Pamela? Did you really shut off utilities to a neighbor's house? Is it true you stand to profit from the townhomes? I sat quietly in the front row, let it build. Finally, when Pamela tried to gavel the room down, I stood. Madam President, I said, voice steady, I'd like to speak, as the directly affected party. Dead silence. She couldn't refuse, not in front of a packed room, not after what had already come out. She nodded stiffly. I walked to the front, unfolded my notes. Neighbors, you've read the article, you've heard the rumors, let me fill in the blanks. I walked them through it, calmly, methodically. The timing of Pamela's campaign against my rental, the utility shutdowns traced back to her IP, the false police reports, the rezoning application language, her personal financial interest. Each point landed harder than the last. People were gasping, murmuring. Some were outright glaring at her now. I finished with this. I tried every legal avenue to resolve this peacefully. I notified the board. I asked Pamela directly to stop. I worked with the city to confirm my rights. She chose to escalate. She chose to abuse her position for personal gain. And as of today, I have filed formal complaints with the City Ethics Commission and the County District Attorney's Office. I held up the stamped complaint. You will all be receiving copies, and if necessary, I will pursue civil action against both the HOA and Pamela personally. I let that hang in the air, then added, I've loved living here for 12 years. I've served on committees, I've followed the rules, but I will not be bullied, and I will not watch this community be sold out for one person's greed. Applause broke out. Actual applause. Pamela's face was sheet white. She tried to stammer out a response, something about misunderstandings and mischaracterizations, but it was too late. The room had turned. People were openly confronting her now. You told us it was about community standards. You lied to us, Pamela. You used our money for this? The board, who had clearly not been fully briefed by her, looked shell-shocked. Finally, the vice president stood. We need an emergency executive session, she said shakily, effective immediately. Pamela tried to object, but the board overruled her. They filed out in a huddle, leaving the room buzzing like a hornet's nest. I stayed a few more minutes, answering questions, calming folks down. Then I went home, poured another bourbon, sat on my porch, and waited, because the next shoe, it was going to drop fast. The fallout hit faster than I expected. By Monday morning, Sarah's story had spread, way beyond just the local paper. A regional news site picked it up, then a legal blog, then the city's morning radio show, which did an entire segment titled, HOA President's Gone Rogue, When Community Power Turns Corrupt. And guess who they featured first? Pamela Stratton. I knew the real blow would come from inside Clearwater Hills, though. See, Pamela had ruled this place for almost a decade. People were used to nodding along. But when residents found out she'd been using their HOA dues to cover legal fees tied to her personal land deal, that snapped something. By Tuesday, the HOA's Facebook group, usually reserved for bake sale flyers and lawn service recommendations, had exploded. Thread after thread, Pamela must resign. Emergency meeting needed. Where is our money going? I mostly stayed out of it. No need to fuel the fire. It was burning just fine on its own. But behind the scenes, Nate and I kept feeding little drips to trusted neighbors, neat screenshots, filings, documents, and nothing false, just the truth. And the truth was ugly. By Thursday, the board, now in full damage control, called an emergency special session. Open to all members. No RSVP required. I didn't have to guess how it would go. The night of the meeting, I arrived early again, and once again, the clubhouse was packed. Even more people this time, easily double the crowd from last week. Some brought copies of the article, others had printed HOA financial reports and highlighted suspicious line items. Pamela walked in late again, alone this time. No husband, no allies flanking her. She looked rattled, pale, hands shaking just slightly as she set her folder on the table. The board president, not Pamela, opened the meeting. We are here tonight to address serious concerns raised by the community regarding recent events and to discuss next steps. Pamela tried to cut in. I'd like to remind everyone that the board has not yet verified these allegations. But the room erupted. Lies! Stop hiding! You stole from us! The board president banged the gavel. Order, order! Finally, the crowd settled enough to proceed. They opened the floor to questions. And oh boy, the questions came fast and hard. How much of our dues were spent on legal fees? Why didn't you disclose your financial interest in the rezoning? Who authorized the utility shutoffs? Did you file the police complaints personally? Pamela's answers were slippery, evasive. At this time, I cannot comment on pending legal matters. There has been a misunderstanding regarding my role. All actions were taken in the best interest of community standards. But the crowd wasn't buying it anymore. The tipping point came when one elderly neighbor, Mrs. Grayson, sweet woman who bakes cookies for every block party, stood up. She held up her HOA dues statement. I'm on a fixed income, she said quietly, voice trembling. I paid my dues trusting they were being used properly. I did not pay for them to be used to harass a neighbor or to enrich our president. Dead silence. Pamela opened her mouth, but nothing came out. And that was it. The board president stood. In light of the overwhelming concerns from the community and given the evidence presented, this board is moving to hold an immediate vote of no confidence in the current HOA president. Gasps and murmurs. The motion was seconded instantly, and then they voted, right there, on the spot. Ballots handed out, collected, counted. Final tally, 62 votes for removal, 3 against, 1 abstention. Pamela was out, effective immediately. The board president announced it formally. Pamela stood, trembling, face drained of color. She tried to speak one final time. I have always acted in good faith. But the crowd cut her off with a slow, deliberate round of clapping, the coldest applause I've ever heard. She gathered her papers with shaking hands, walked out alone. Nobody followed. Nobody said goodbye. I stayed until the end, chatted with neighbors, answered questions. One of the board members who'd barely spoken before approached me after. "Thank you," he said simply. "You did what we should have done a long time ago." I just nodded, because this was never about me, really. It was about stopping abuse of power. And finally, it was done. It's funny how quiet the neighborhood got after that. No more anonymous flyers, no more urgent HOA emails about community standards, no more strange utility issues either. Pamela, haven't seen her since that night. Word is she and her husband are taking time away at their vacation home 2 states over. Can't say anyone here misses them. The board, what's left of it, has been scrambling to clean up the mess. They voted to suspend all pending legal actions, refunded part of the HOA dues allocated for legal expenses, launched a full audit of HOA finances, and yes, they formally withdrew all community support for the rezoning project. That was a particularly sweet line to read in the minutes. As for my little craftsman on Westvale, it's thriving. After everything went public, Airbnb reinstated my superhost status. I posted an update to my listing. This home has survived a full campaign of HOA harassment and come out stronger. We proudly support community integrity and guest safety. The response? Overwhelmingly positive. Bookings shot back up. Guests started leaving reviews like loved staying in a place that stood up for what's right. 5 stars for both the house and the host's backbone. And me? I've got a new project now. Remember those empty lots Pamela was trying to rezone? The developer, spooked by the PR mess, pulled out of the deal. And one of those lots, the one closest to my house, quietly hit the market last month. I bought it, not for development, not for profit. I'm putting in a little community garden, native plants, herbs, a bench or 2. No HOA approval required. And last week, while I was planting the first rosemary bush, Mrs. Grayson walked by. She smiled and handed me a mason jar of homemade jam. "Thank you," she said simply. I just smiled back. Sometimes, winning doesn't look like a lawsuit. Sometimes it looks like a quiet afternoon in your own garden, knowing the bullies lost, and the good neighbors won.